There's such a big wow factor in the universe for me. Everywhere I look, I'm like a kid at a fun fair. We have such a big and such an exciting universe that I couldn't see myself ever getting bored. My childhood was a privilege. I grew up in a very remote part of Zululand. And my father not only had a tremendous feel for physics and would discuss it with me often, he was also an agnostic. That meant that he didn't know whether there was a God or not, and the result of that was that I didn't have any kind of religious prejudice when I grew up. I went through a fair amount of turmoil in my teenage years, seeking answers, and I looked to the east, particularly in the writings of Hinduism and in Buddhism. And that stayed with me pretty much until I left school. Then, importantly, I abandoned that search and involved myself in science. Now, there's been a conflict between science and religion for as long, I think, as there have been science and religion. And so when I went into science and really started taking up astrophysics seriously, I went in with the knowledge, or with the assumption, that it was something quite devoid of spirituality. I found later on that that's quite a wrong assumption to make. What happens when we look to the heavens and use astrophysics to try and find answers? There are several things that influence us and contribute to the conclusions we might reach. What we tend to focus on most often is what we know, what we've learnt, our knowledge base. There's another very big influence in what we discover and the philosophy that we develop, and that's what we don't know. Our ignorance in an infinite universe plays a far bigger part because we are infinitely more ignorant than we are wise. So it's in that part of the universe which we don't know that we discover spirituality. If one goes into science and has the attitude, which is commonly held, that maybe because of our training and education, that we're something of a smart aleck and we know it all and we're going to find a theory of everything, then I would think that the journey in science would be devoid of any kind of spiritual content. But for me, fortunately, I had mentors who made a point of telling me that it's nothing to be ashamed of to admit that you don't know something. So I was able in my own case to factor in my own ignorance in my search and realize that there was a vast universe full of amazing things and that I, in fact, am very, very small. That is how I came to have a very real spiritual sense in science. I had that quite standard turmoil that one has, seeking answers to things that we don't know. And I concentrated on looking in Hinduism and Buddhism to try to find in the wisdom of the East the answers to the questions that were kept on popping up in my mind. And it was only after I left school that I abandoned that search and turned to science, which I thought, quite wrongly, had no spiritual content whatsoever.
Okay, I'll try again.
Okay?
Yeah.
I spend a lot of my time in contemplation because it's during those quiet moments of introspection that I get some kind of intuitive knowledge, a kind of vision. I sometimes say to people's amusement that the stars talk to me, and they do talk to me in this way. It is in communicating with nature that I've received most of the knowledge that I have. And perhaps the defining moment for me in this journey of mine in science occurred because of the blossom of an orchid. Someone gave to me an orchid as a present, and I kept it on my desk. And when I got it, it was still furled. The buds were still furled. And over a period of weeks, the buds opened into the most amazing flowers. And I looked at these flowers, the intricate detail, and I realized that those flowers didn't come about by accident, by some kind of random collision of particles. They came about because of a plan that's written into the seed. And I made the connection. Repeated patterns in nature aren't an accident. They're part of a plan. Now, when we look up in the heavens and we see galaxies and we see nebulae, we see repeated patterns, endlessly repeated patterns. Now, that's not an accident. That's design.